Hi guys, welcome to Refugee from Russia podcast. How are you doing? Today we're doing a part 2 of the story of Alla and Aroldo. If you haven't seen my latest video, go check it out. Part 1 always goes before part 2. However, if you for some reason don't have time to check it out, I'm going to give you a quick overview of their story. So Alla and Aroldo. Alla is a ethnically Ukrainian woman who was born in USSR. Aroldo is Cuban. He came to USSR to get professional education and training. At that time, Cuba would send mostly men to study in USSR so that when they come back, they can fulfill their duty and help the country prosper with whatever knowledge and skills they acquired. Alla was in her first year in college, and Aroldo was in his final year. They met and they madly fell in love. Everybody's head would turn when they saw them because of how honest and authentic and real they were as a couple. Soon after they met, about 6 months roughly, Aroldo proposed, they got married, and soon after that, they had a baby boy. They named him Aroldo Jr. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Aroldo came to USSR to study, and he was bound to come back to Cuba, so he had to go. When he left, he was making plans of getting Alla out of USSR, and the biggest issue that stood between them was money. Unfortunately, it was extremely expensive to buy tickets. Alla even played lottery, hoping that she will win some money to buy plane tickets. And while they were trying to find a way to make this work, they would exchange letters. Wonderful, beautiful letters. If you want to learn more about what kind of letters, I read some of them in part 1. But long story short, for the overview, once about 4 or 5 years later, once they felt that there is no way out and naturally that perhaps they have to move on, or they are forced to move on, they made a decision to move on with their lives. Alla got married and she had another child. She was married for 7 years until she got a divorce. After that, one day, Alla finds out that Aroldo is actually looking for her, and looking for her through Red Cross. And finally, the door to long-awaited reunion has opened after 32 years. When I think about this, it blows my mind. Now, questions that a lot of people might have: why did it take that long? Couldn't it have come to USSR or Ukraine earlier? Does he have a wife? Is he single? Maybe he has more children. Most importantly, does he still love Alla? And if he does, and they reunite, will he take her to Cuba, or will he come to Ukraine and stay in Ukraine? So, in part 2 today, we will try to find out answers to these questions. In 2019, let me tell you a story of how the reunion actually happened. 2019, that's 5 years ago. There was this show called Один за всіх. This is a Ukrainian show. You can translate this to One for All. This show highlights stories, resonant stories, incredible stories of ordinary people in Ukraine. And when Один за всіх learned about Red Cross and how they were able to locate Alla and their love story, etc., they wanted to help. They said, let us connect with Red Cross, let us work with the embassy in Cuba and try to bring Aroldo to Ukraine so that the two can reunite. You know, this show, Один за всіх, actually kind of similar to the ones I've mentioned before. There is this Russian show called Live Broadcast and another one, Let Them Speak. And they have a similar setup where you have the main characters of the story, you have their relatives come in or their friends, you have an audience of random people, And you also have 2 or 3 couches filled with experts and maybe celebrities. Among the experts in the Audience of Sich episode that was dedicated to Alla and Aroldo, we had 2 media hosts, 1 psychologist, we had 1 human rights activist, we also had 1 artist, and I believe we had 1 Red Cross employee. No politicians though, which is a bit interesting, because I noticed that's a big difference between like what kind of experts Ukrainian show invites versus Russian show invites. So didn't see any politicians in the Ukrainian show. Now, also worth mentioning that any episode of Audience of Sich that was published after, I believe, the annexation of Crimea is in Ukrainian. So this particular episode was in Russian. That's why I was able to translate it. That's why I don't need to translate it, essentially. I know what they're saying because I'm fluent in Russian. Maybe there was a little bit of where I had to listen in really closely, because Alla's mom was switching between Ukrainian and Russian, but I understand what she was saying because, things like batko, for example, Ukrainian word for father, I know what it means. I had a Ukrainian classmate, so that helped. Now, let me tell you how the program begins. The host comes in and he tells a story of Alla and Aroldo by inviting Alla's sister, Lydia. Lydia played a big role in Alla's and Aroldo's relationship. If you remember in part 1, she was the one who was accompanying them everywhere they went, and they couldn't go by themselves. So she was always rooting for her back then and now as well. You could see a smile on her face. She was so happy that her sister might finally be reunited with her first love, with her first husband. The host shows a little clip on the screen with how Red Cross explains the process of finding Alla. And as Alla's sister looking at that screen, the host shortly after announces that Aroldo is coming on the stage and that Lydia, Alla's sister, is going to get reunited with him. I want to play that video and watch it with you guys and share my reactions after. Okay, before I play, the video is actually in Russian, like I mentioned earlier, excuse me, but you might hear some Spanish in the background. You will see what I mean.
Вот этот чемодан я купил тогда, когда жил в Украине. И теперь прилетел.
Okay, so that's when Aroldo just arrived at the airport, and the suitcase that he's holding is the suitcase that he bought in USSR when he first came to study.
That's wild.
He still has it.
What?
Посмотрите, улыбка, разговор, как огонь, да.
Я даже не могу передать, что творится сейчас в моей душе и сердце. Меня переполняют чувства. Я даже не знаю, что скажу Алле, когда увижу ее. Я очень переживаю. Я скажу ей, что люблю ее так же сильно, как любил раньше. Возможно, в это сложно поверить, но моя любовь не угасла.
For anyone who missed the first part, he is actually just saying.
He was saying it's an homenaje, like it's
Oh, you can decipher the Spanish.
No, I could hear him.
You can.
I could hear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no,
okay,
I could
good.
hear him. I could definitely hear him.
Несмотря ни на годы разлуки, ни на расстоянии. Я не могу поверить, что спустя 32 года моя мечта наконец сбудется. Это невероятно.
Встречайте, Арольдо.
Вы знаете, как сын. Ой, как ты тупенько, голубик.
Где está?
Ой,
Где? Алла, где?
здесь. Ой, как приятно. Ой, да не изменился.
The very first thing he asked, this is Alla's sister, Lydia. The very first thing he asked, where is Alla?
Oh my god, that's amazing. Well, actually, I think he says, Oh, Allah here. Is that what he said?
In Russian, they translated, where is Allah?
Let me see, because he said...
Alaki?
No? I think he said alegría, which is, are you happy? Is what? Hold on,
interesting.
Let me see, hold on, because it might. Unless he said it in English.
No.
Allah here? If that's what he said, or he's saying alegría.
Oh, maybe they didn't translate it right. Very, very possible.
Let me see.
Oh no, he said this in oh my God. He says this in Russian. In my head, I'm like, I speak 4 languages, so I mixed it up. He says this in Russian. Allah где?
Everybody's shocked that he spoke in Russian.
He actually speaks it at this point, I don't think as well as he used to. But
Right.
all the letters, in the 5 years that they've been exchanging letters, were in Russian.
Right.
And actually, he wrote them in such proper way, in a cursive.
Right.
You wouldn't even guess if you didn't know that he was Cuban.
Wow.
That was a Cuban man who was writing those letters.
Incredible.
So
on to the second video.
yeah.
Right?
So now I want to talk a little bit about what happens after this first reunion. The next person that is invited to reunite with Haroldo is his ex-mother-in-law, who is at that time 82 years old.
Wow.
Сыночек дорогой, видишь, снова?
Then she loves him.
She says,
That's amazing.
She says, my son, my dear.
Oh my God.
Тихо, тихо, тихо. Все, мам, все, мам, все.
Моя ты сыночка золотая. Это бывает. Я тебя всегда думала, солнышко. Ай, моя солнышко.
Да это будет долго.
Прошу, присаживайтесь. Присаживайтесь вместе.
Мам, давай.
Мой ты любимый.
Oh, because I guess at the time of them being together, they were in college.
Mm-hmm.
So she was way younger. Like it was 32 years. She was like 50 in her 50s, early 50s. Wow.
And
of course she's going to miss him.
If you remember from the part 1, when she was asked, how do you feel about your daughter's boyfriend being Cuban? She said that if she likes him, we like him. And that whenever he would come, I would do everything for him. I would cook the food that he asked. I would take care of him. And that's at the same time when Haroldo was not allowed to be on the street without
without supervision.
Supervision, exactly. And, she accepted him like her own. Like she says, my son.
Wow.
Yeah. Every time I watch this, it really... If we continue, let's continue watching it. Actually, there's a little bit more here.
Прости, мне ж такая жизнь не сложилась, моя сыночка золотая.
Все, мам.
Антонина Кирилловна, узнали?
Конечно, взамен точно Арольда, моя сына золотая. Мой ты любимый бузячок, я так любила.
The host is asking her, Antonina Ivanna, did you recognize him? She's like, of course I have recognized him. This is Haroldo.
Wow.
And that's her. There is a photo of them.
Right. I've seen it. Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
I wonder what happened to the father. They don't talk about the father. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but yeah.
Wow.
So that's Haroldo reuniting with his ex-mother-in-law. When was the last time you saw ex-mother-in-law being so happy about her son-in-law?
Facts.
So at this point, they learned that Haroldo was actually married and he had 2 kids. One of his kids has a child, so he has become a grandfather. And yeah, so little by little, as he is getting reunited with people, we learn more and more about what happened with him. And one of the other things that we learned at this time was that, you know, he was making an average $30 per month. And that really...
Now it's way worse. Now it's way worse than 30.
How can it be way worse?
It's so bad. It's so bad. Rice costs eight, let's say, for example, 8 pesos. They make around like 14 to 20. Or maybe less. And imagine 8 pesos for rice, and they can't afford rice. If they're gonna get rice, they can't get bread. And if they can't, you know, if they want to get bread, they might not be able to get rice, or
what do people eat?
If they have, like, you know, farm animals and stuff, I hope off of that and off of the land, because it's tough. It's tough. They're not even making enough to even buy, you know, oh my God, now that we're actually talking about it, they've been 48 hours without power.
Oh, I came across a TikTok today.
48 hours without power. Now they're going 3 days consecutively without power and then turning it on because they don't have any, first of all, petroleum, and the second, which is the major part, is that the warehouses are so old and the electrical plants are so old, and the government obviously doesn't care to fix any of them. So you know what it is to go without. Well, I know what it is. Until they installed
you have experienced
heater,
that too.
Yeah, heater. I've experienced cold showers. You know, and having to boil your water to make it hot. You know, it's tough. And then you know, cleaning yourself and then having a little jar to, you know.
I'm very familiar with that.
And then later on, thankfully, you know, my family implemented an electrical heater. But still, nowadays, that won't work. You have to go back to how it was before because there's no electricity. So now you can't even heat up your water if your stove's electrical, you know. You're probably going to have to go outside and make a fire real quick and... You know, like old times. And I feel like people really forget nowadays.
Like things like electricity and like getting.
I feel like
the water from the fridge is cold. You get the ice.
I feel like in America, if like the power went out and like the internet went out, and I feel like a lot of people would go crazy. Due to like being stuck to to technology.
Right. It's like an extension to the body.
Remember when we were talking about how they would take 2 weeks for mail to reach each other?
Right.
And then that
was before you circle up, and then that
actually
was...
this was in part 1, by the way, guys.
Right.
Like now, you know, imagine if that happens now, people will go crazy. You know, maybe older folks will understand a little bit, you know. But, you know, younger people, they don't have, you know, their socials or whatever.
I feel like as a generation, they would go into collective withdrawal.
Oh, 100%.
Because being able to get instant messages and go from that to having to wait 2 weeks, I mean, there has to be some withdrawal period with your body.
Something.
Just like with a drug.
Exactly. Something has to happen because, like, you know, maybe it would force us to go back to the old times where we would, you know, go outside and
talk,
you know, with the family or with your neighbors, you know, 'cause that's what I used to do. Either way, obviously, you know, there's the bad side of, you know, things, but that all of the bad gets collected by all the good that happens within the neighborhood because there are a real community.
Right.
Opposed to nowadays, there is it's just too much technology and like everybody's separated. Everybody wants to speak through FaceTime.
And they have the money, whereas like back to the story,
exactly.
They had no money but they had this burning desire to reunite.
Exactly.
So it almost makes me wonder sometimes, like, Maybe the money in some cases is misplaced.
Misplaced.
I know.
Yeah.
I've had so many thoughts like, oh, I wish somebody gave them the money. Oh, I wish they had a GoFundMe page. Or I wish, the government helped. Or I wish
Right.
this, so many thoughts in the back of my mind. But I don't know. It's just like with mother-in-law said, I'm sorry that the life turned out like that.
Literally.
So the next person who reunites with Haroldo is Haroldo Jr., his son.
Oh my God.
And remember from part 1, he was only 2 weeks old when Haroldo left USSR.
So he probably has no Spanish.
No.
Oh, well, maybe he picked it up through the stories that the grandma would read him.
Maybe. Because,
You
remember also in
That
part
works.
1,
Yeah.
there was a lot of
Stories of
stories
Cuba
and Atlas of Cuba. Actually, the family tried so hard so he doesn't forget his father. He even danced bachata for some time as well
Wow.
to feel this connection. I don't know, I feel like maybe it's in the blood,
Right.
he had natural gravitation towards bachata because his father was
Like
Cuban.
Salsa?
Yeah,
Like it's-
salsa.
Salsa.
And
more.
honestly, this reunion is short of a miracle to finally get reunited with your father after 32 years.
Amazing.
So let's watch that together.
Рольда Арольдович Ортис Гомес сегодня приехал на встречу к отцу-кубинцу. И вся студия с нетерпением ждет его выхода. Арольдо,
Do you think he looks like his dad?
What? Yes.
He does?
I mean, he has an obvious mix of looking, Russian, but he definitely looks like Gerardo for sure.
Арольдо, почему плачешь?
Emoción.
Это все эмоции.
Какие?
Encontrarme con
Я
él.
безумно рад,
Con la-
и в то же время мне невероятно больно от того, что меня не было рядом все эти годы.
La nieta,
Что я не видел, как рос мой сын.
él, ella.
Какое счастье, что я здесь, в этой стране, что я в Украине.
Uf.
Honestly, when I see grown men cry, it does something to me. Because they don't usually cry.
Exactly.
And the son, you see, he's hiding his face.
Right. He doesn't want to show emotion. Yeah. No, it's tough. It's tough. I could see how tough it is.
There was a guest he was an expert. He was invited to be on the show.
Mm-hmm.
He also has a similar story of his own with a good ending. He was separated from his son for 12 years. His son was in Germany and he was also looking for his son. I just wanted to read a quote from this guy. He was that expert who was the human rights activist invited to this show. He says the following: your story intertwines with mine. In my story, it also happened that I became separated from my son. My son lived in Germany, and I searched for him for 12 years. When I finally met him, my soul and heart were right here, and he was showing to the neck. My heart burst with joy. I can imagine how you must feel. It's been 30 years since you last saw your son. Stay strong. End quote. Now, who do we have next? Well, we finally have Ala, Haroldo's first wife and Haroldo's first love. Before we watch the video with you, I wanted to quickly mention that in those 5 years that they were together, They exchanged numerous letters, and I read to you guys in part 1 a lot of those letters. So if you want to learn more about them, go to part 1. But before I show you the video, the reunion between Alla and Haroldo, I want to read a little sentence from one of the letters. It goes like this. My beloved Haroldo, I still wear your ring, and I never take it off. End quote. So this was one of the last letters before their communications completely cut off. Now, let's watch the reunion between Alla and Haroldo, her ex-husband, who she hasn't seen for 32 years.
Мы все так долго ждали, а некоторые в этой студии ждали 32 года. Алла Вишневская.
Ой, здравствуйте, а то я пришла и с вами не поздоровалась. Ой, подождите. Ой. Здравствуйте.
Алла. Узнаете?
Конечно.
Это он?
Только волос нет шикарных.
Харольда, а что это у вас в руках?
Он и забыл.
He forgot to give her the flowers.
Yeah, with all the emotion.
With all of the emotions. Oh my God.
Wow, I see it. It hit you.
Yeah. And I feel like everybody in the audience too was crying, and not once.
No, I seen.
Multiple times. I don't know. Just think about this. Like we have money. We spend them on whatever. Like sometimes even buying a plane ticket to go to LA. It's like an easy thing. But sometimes it's not an easy thing, and you're playing a lottery. You're trying to win the money so that you can reunite with your loved one, and so that your son can see his father. And you're trying for 5 years, and it's not working out until a program learns about your story and makes it happen. By the way, it took 2 years to get Haroldo out of Cuba to Ukraine. I don't know why it took 2 years though.
The process takes a while. It takes from 5 to 10 years to get out of Cuba to go to America. So imagine that, and blessings for the.
Why?
Because of the government. So bad.
But what do you... I'm familiar with getting a visa and the process and
Right.
and
So
all
that
that.
process is really hard it's like luck basically. To try to get a visa in Cuba is like a lottery.
Okay, so walk me through the process. You apply for a visa, for example, a tourist visa. Is it easier to get a tourist visa?
No, I don't believe so. Like my grandparents were Spanish, so they got to at least get connected to like the Spanish passport. So my aunt out here in America, she did all the documents, but that, with money as well, that costs a lot of money to.
Like she
get
became the
those
sponsor
documents.
for them.
Pretty much, and then well, technically, she's been the sponsor for everybody, so to come over. So yeah, she's amazing. But yeah, it's a process. Sometimes it doesn't take us that long, but my aunt and my uncle with my little cousin, they just got here, and they did their papers 10 years ago.
Wow.
And You know, now is when they.
Is it a 10-year of wait, or is it
It's when you know.
you
it's
wait, they get rejected.
much,
You
pretty much.
try again
Mhm.
and then get rejected.
Pretty much. Wow. Or you just wait, you know, until the papers, you know, get to you. But yeah, it's tough.
So yeah, it is really hard. Once they get reunited, experts and people in the audience were asking them, you know, a lot of questions. One of the questions that Haroldo was asked, Haroldo, are you still married? Turns out he's not. Turns out, just like Allah, he spent 7 years with his second partner, second
Wow.
wife, and then got divorced.
Wow.
He said that I just couldn't be with that woman. I love the kids very much, but I couldn't be with that woman. After the divorce, I believe he was alone for over 10 years or so, if not more. And then he started searching for Allah. I think he was searching for her even before that, but then finally he was able to do that through that Red Cross. The next question people asked, okay, do you still love Allah? And of course there was a bit of a delay because he was wearing an earpiece. Back then he spoke Russian very, very well, but he might have forgotten a bit. And after he got the translation in his ear, he just nodded, I love her. I still love her. 32 years later.
Wow.
Another question people asked, so are you going to take her to Cuba? He said, yes. I will not miss this chance. I will try to get my son and my wife. And I don't recall exactly if that was mentioned, but they might have also mentioned that maybe he will stay in Ukraine. But I think the main next step was to get her to Cuba, to meet with the family that he has there. Actually, his daughter, who is Haroldo's junior sister, made a video to welcome him, to say that they're really excited to meet their half-brother, and they're looking forward to getting reunited. So you can already tell that on Haroldo's side, just like on Allah's side, they were very, very happy to see each other. Honestly, there was a person in the audience who made this comment, and I agree with that 1000%, that kids should be born in love. Despite them being separated for 32 years, you can see how happy Haroldo's daughters are. You can see how happy Haroldo Jr. is because of the parents like Allah and Haroldo, who loved each other very much.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's real love.
And it, I think, restored faith for so many people, not just in the video. The video got about, I believe, 5 million views, but also restored the faith of regular people who were in the audience. Because honestly, you don't see this very often. And this was truly short of a miracle. Now, right before the video ended, the program, Один за всех, showed Haroldo and Allah and Haroldo Jr. walking around in the city. And Haroldo was saying that he's working on getting her out, they're working on papers, and that's how the program ends.
Wow.
I wanted to get you guys...
Do you think they... I'm so sorry. Do you think they actually went?
I was looking for that information really hard. And I was trying to get up-to-date information. So I looked through comments to see if anyone knows. Sometimes it happens, you can get an update in the comments. I researched online. I tried my hardest to find social media of Allah or her son to see if I can find any information. But what I found is not very reliable. And I'll explain to you why. First, I was looking at comments. And there were a lot of comments asking the same exact question. Are they together? Did she go to Cuba? And there was one account that was answering these questions with the following comment. Haroldo's father stayed in Cuba, and the network never paid for the family's flight to Cuba due to limited budget. The son saw his father only once, and after the filming of the show, the father returned home, and that was the end of it. End quote. The reason why I don't trust this commentary is because on another comment, the same person responded something different. So this is another comment that was in the comment section. It would have been better if Haroldo had stayed in Ukraine. Life in Cuba is very hard. And the same comment replies, well, he's in Ukraine, end quote. So I don't know.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, I'd rather them stay over there. But I mean, if they stayed in Ukraine, I hope they stayed safe with everything that's happening right now. God bless them and everybody over there. Well, on both sides, you know. I hope peace comes very soon.
I had a similar.
If they went to Cuba, I'd rather them be over in Ukraine than in Cuba. I promise you, they would have been trapped.
Despite the fact that there is a war in Ukraine.
I'm sure they would have moved, you know, and found their.
Or they could have been refugees in Europe.
That too.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
If they stayed in Ukraine.
I'd rather them go. I'd rather them, unfortunately, go through that and try to like get away. At least not be in the war, and get out of it safely. But get out. You know. They would have been trapped in Cuba.
I had a very sad thought about Haroldo Jr. Because by the time the war started, he was in the eligible age for military draft.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speculate, but if he
would have been taken into the military.
If he's still there, there's a high chance that he is in the army.
Well, both. If he stayed or would have left, unless he would have hid for a little bit, in Cuba, they would have brought him in as well. Because
despite him being Ukrainian citizen,
that could have saved him.
If he was in Cuba.
Yeah. Well, because because he's not a Cuban citizen.
Right.
So in Cuba, they do the same thing. At 18, you got to go to the army.
Right.
No, like, ifs or buts. Oh, actually, unless you become a doctor or you study medicine, like, it's either you study medicine or become a doctor and you go to college, or if you don't want to do none of that, you go straight to the army. Yeah.
Honestly, like, breaks my heart. However, whatever way I look at this, if he stayed in Ukraine, there's a very high chance that he is fighting right now for his country. And you know what that can mean. If he didn't stay in Ukraine and he went to Cuba,
right,
and maybe he tried applying for dual citizenship, because that's what a lot of people sometimes do, right? Because they're half one ethnicity and half the other. That also would have meant that he was in the army.
Right. Oh,
it's like,
crazy.
You know, when I think about this reality, it is the reality for so many people to choose between two things that are equally bad. Just to be with the loved ones, just to put the food on the table, just to live another day. And, you know, netizens were also kind of torn. A lot of people were very happy for them, and this story restored their faith in love. But there were also a lot of people who were very sad. One of the netizens says the following: "The only thing that cannot be brought back is time," end quote. That actually I got goosebumps when I read that comment. Not everyone was supportive. One group of people was very judgmental and very disapproving of Haroldo. And I think this comment summarizes this. Why feel sorry for him? If he wanted to, he would have come back in 30 years, end quote. People were also critical of Ala. One comment reads, I didn't like Ala. She was chatty like her sister, unkempt and overweight. She didn't take much care of herself even though she was married, end quote. What do you guys think of the story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, take care of yourself and your loved ones. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.